All right, so I'm curious how many of you came across this story, but I got to share it with you. This is really something. So it appears like Trump's White House was dealing drugs. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but when you get to specifics, it's the inevitable conclusion of all of the facts that are laid out here. And make no mistake about it, these are facts. We have the records to back this up. And we also, by the way, may have cracked the code of what is Trump on? Because for a long time, there was all sorts of speculation. For example, he was using a UK version of Sudafed, which still had an active ingredient in it, which was a massive upper. He stockpiled the UK version of Sudafed. And then, of course, there's the classic examples of when he was debating Hillary Clinton. He couldn't stop. He was sniffing nonstop, which is a classic example of what a cocaine user would do. But it didn't have to be cocaine that he was sniffing. He could have been sniffing the Sudafed. It could have been Adderall, for example. People who worked on The Apprentice with him claim, hey, he's addicted to Adderall. We may finally have our answer based on some of the records here as to what he's actually on, okay? And the answer may surprise you just a little bit. Okay, so this is in Rolling Stone. Trump's White House pharmacy handed out drugs like candy. A Department of Defense report found an obscene lack of control over the handling of controlled medications while Trump was in office. So we'll get to the list in just a little bit. This is really something. White House pharmacists reportedly distributed uppers and downers like candy to Trump administration officials during his time in office, according to a new report from the Department of Defense Inspector General. So just to be clear, when they say uppers and downers, what that means is these pills were absolutely being used to get high. It wasn't there was an abundance of cholesterol medication that was being handed out. No, it was all stuff that makes you high, okay? The 80-page document, which was released on January 8th, found all phases of the White House medical unit's pharmacy operations had severe and systemic problems due to the unit's reliance on ineffective internal controls to ensure compliance with the pharmacy safety standards. The investigation, which began in 2018 after the Office of Inspector General received complaints about improper medical practices within the White House medical unit, found a slew of compliance issues and improper safety standards. The medical unit's operations fall under the jurisdiction of the White House Military Office. The report covers a period between 2009 and 2018, with a majority of its findings coalescing around 2017 to 2019 during the height of the Trump administration. While Trump lived under the White House roof, the pharmacy reportedly kept messy handwritten records, spent lavishly on brand name medications, and failed to comply with a slew of federal law and Department of Defense regulations governing the handling, distribution, and disposal of prescription medication. Though in-person inspections and interviews with over 120 officials, the report concluded that the White House medical unit provided a wide range of healthcare and pharmaceutical services to ineligible White House staff in violation of federal law and regulation and DoD policy. Additionally, the White House medical unit dispensed prescription medications, including controlled substances, to ineligible White House staff. One witness told the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General that pharmacy staff regularly prepared go bags of prescription medication to White House staff in advance of overseas trips. One of our requirements was to go ahead and make packets up for controlled medications, and these would typically be Ambien or Provigil, and typically both. So Ambien's a sleep medication. Provigil is an upper. It's like an anti-narcolepsy drug that makes you super high and sharp, the witness said. So we would normally make these packets of Ambien and Provigil, and a lot of times they'd be in 5 tablets in a Ziploc bag, and so traditionally, too, we would hand these out. Ambien is a sedative used to treat insomnia. Provigil is a stimulant used to treat narcolepsy. Both are considered controlled medication. The witness added that a lot of times the senior staff would come by, or their staff representatives would come by the residence clinic to pick it up, and it was very much a, hey, I'm here to pick up this for Miss X. And the expectation was we would just go ahead and pass it out. Passing medication out often undersold the problem, as the report found that over-the-counter drugs were often left out in bins for staff to simply grab at their own leisure. The report found that between 2017 and 2019, the White House spent an estimated $46,500 on brand name Ambien, which is 174 times more expensive than the generic equivalent, an estimated $98,000 for brand name Provigil, which is 55 times more expensive than the generic equivalent. In its conclusion, the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General recommended that the Director of Defense Health Agency aid the White House in developing more robust policies for the control and management of prescription medication. Okay. So now let's get to some of the specifics. This is a list of prescription medication that was ordered by the White House medical unit over just a 9-month period in 2019. Thousands of Ambien pills, but more importantly, there were 7 different orders of either fentanyl, morphine, or ketamine. Note that this was just a clinic and didn't do any major procedures, which required even moderate sedation. The real White House drug story wasn't the cocaine found under Biden, but the fentanyl, morphine, ketamine prescribed under Trump. Very possibly to Trump. I'm going to comment on that in a minute. Note that the maximum dosage of Ambien is typically 10 milligrams once per day. This would likely amount to a 3 or 4 year supply over an 8-month period. So now let's break it down. You got Ambien, you got Provigil, you got ketamine, you got morphine, you got fentanyl, you got Vicodin, you got Percocet, you got all sorts of various versions of Oxy, which of course is the opioid, which makes you high. It's a pain reliever, but it definitely makes you high, and it's of course very addictive. You have various kinds of benzos. So when you go through the list of the stuff that people were taking, it's like a who's who of the kind of drugs that would get you high. So now, by the way, it was what's his name, Ronnie Jackson or Ronnie Johnson or something like that. He's now like running for office, and he was Trump's doctor. It appears like this is the guy who was like greenlighting all this stuff, and it leads to a bunch of questions. So what are the possibilities here? The possibilities are they knew what they were doing. They were basically filling out all these prescriptions. They would give it to certain people to then sell on the street and make a buck, make a profit, right? Maybe they were getting a cut of it as well. What they float in one of the articles is that like it could be that White House staffers, but then also their extended family who they don't have authority to use the White House pharmacy for, they would like use the White House pharmacy for more extended family for all of the people who work within the White House. So it's just like not abiding by basic regulations and sort of having a more expansive view of who the pharmacy is for. But I think the most likely scenario is, honestly, the drug dealing angle, because there's no way that even if the number of people that work in the White House is high, there's no way that people just in the families of the people who work at the White House, that they would need ketamine and Percocet and Vicodin and fentanyl, which is like literally if you're stage 4 cancer and dying and you have the most severe pain of all time, that's the only people who take fentanyl. And so at the beginning of this, I said, well, let's talk about Trump here. So I think Adderall was on the list, but I'm not 100% sure because the list is so long. I was going through it the other day. I gave you all like the spicy ones. Adderall, I think, was on the list, but the one that keeps coming up, and it seems like more was dished out, is Provigil. So Provigil or Nuvigil, it's anti-narcolepsy drug. So it's for people who like fall asleep all the time, no matter what. It like keeps you awake. It's sort of like a newer, more refined version of a cocaine or an Adderall. It's an upper that helps with like mental focus. And when I saw that pill, I went, oh, that might be the one. That might be the one that Trump's on. It would make sense, right? I would think it's either Adderall or that. But the fact that you had colossal amounts of these things being prescribed and being dished out from the White House pharmacy, it really goes to show, I got to be honest, I don't see an answer here that doesn't involve dealing drugs. I don't think it's possible to have these kinds of medications being prescribed at this clip if you're just serving the people who work at the White House and their family members. I don't think that's possible. So then the question is, who knew? Who was getting a cut of it? You know, just how deep does the rot go? How deep does this plot go? But yeah, I'm sure some of this, probably the Provigil, was going to Big Daddy Trump. And by the way, just so we're clear, Biden should be on that shit too. Like, I'm not even knocking Trump for taking it. I'm not. If anything, Biden should be on that too. And maybe he is on it already. Because, like, shit, man, it's necessary. And Trump's talked about in the past, like, oh yeah, I only sleep like 2 or 4 hours a night or something like that. He says he doesn't sleep a lot. And like, that would also add up with taking massive amounts of uppers. So we don't know exactly what went on here, but I don't think there's an explanation that isn't nefarious, if that makes sense. I really don't. because the list is just astonishing of all the various pharmaceutical drugs that make you high as balls. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.